Hello, Buckeyes, and welcome back to the Sports Perspective here on Buckeye TV. I am Brad Comer, and alongside me is our guest, Brandon Beam of Scarlet and Gray Sports Radio. He's going to talk to us about what we're going to see from Ohio State in the 2013 season. Brandon, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Brad. I appreciate it.
Now, let's go into Ohio State because this was a team that went 6-7 in 2011 under Luke Fickell when he was in his interim position as head coach. And under Urban Meyer, when he took over that position, 12-0, he took a 6-7 team going undefeated. And now this Saturday versus the opener with Buffalo, what's different about this Buckeye TV in 2012? I mean, in 2012 than what we in 2013, excuse me, than what we see in 2012.
I think in 2013, what you're expecting from Ohio State would definitely be like they have more expectations this year coming in. Last year, you didn't know what to expect. Urban Meyer, everybody expected them to be good, but nobody expected them to be 12-0. So I think this year, everybody is expecting them, especially with their strength of schedule, to be 12-0. And I think anything other than that might be disappointment for the Buckeyes.
Going 12-0 when in 2012, how do you top those expectations?
I think it's simple. You do the same thing you did last year. You go 12-0, except you add 2 games to your resume. You know, Ohio State's bowl eligible this year, so if they are 12-0 going into the end of the year, they are going to play in that Big Ten championship game, which will be a first for Ohio State. They've never been in that position before. And then, if they win that and they're 13-0, the big one, 14-0, I think that is really what Ohio State is talking about. So to be able to top 12-0, I think you either go 13-1 or you go 14-0 and you win the big one.
But can you see fans saying that 13-1 isn't good enough? Especially when you go 12-0 in a year where that same team went 6-7, and it seems like, we're both walking around here on campus. Everyone's talking about a national championship. Would losing one game be that much of an upset for them this season?
I think to the coaching staff, no. I think losing 1 or 2 games would still be a good year because you have a lot of young guys, a lot of inexperience on the team. But the fans, we're built around a tradition of Ohio State winning football games, and we're set to win now. Like, that's the fans' mentality going into the season. So Ohio State, they have a lot riding on the table this year. So in the fans' perspective, I think a one-loss team without a national championship, especially with these expectations, is a bad year.
All right, and speaking of the young guys, before we go ahead and preview both the Buckeye offense and the Buckeye defense, we got to talk about this depth chart that just came out today from the Ohio State spokesperson. Obviously, Carlos Hyde, Rod Smith, Bradley Roby left off there because of suspensions, but there are 12 true freshmen on this 2-deep roster right now, on this 2-deep depth chart, excuse me. What's that say about this current freshman class?
Well, one thing it says is, like you said, they have depth. This is a young team, and Urban Meyer came in. It proves why they were the number 3 recruiting class last year. They have 12 of their 25 guys are freshmen, and 12 of their 25 freshmen are, 1 or 2 deep, either starting or in the 2 spot. So what it says, the future is bright for Ohio State.
Sticking with freshmen, 2 that stood out in training camp from what we've heard from Urban Meyer coaches or players was Dontre Wilson, especially, and Ezekiel Elliott. Both of them were the first 2 to have their black stripes removed, and Urban said on Monday that they would see time playing against Buffalo. But how much of a role will these 2 play throughout the entire season, not just at Buffalo?
I think we'll see Ohio State play these guys. Urban Meyer a few years ago, like I said before, Jeff Demps and Chris Rainey at Florida, the 2 speedsters. They score touchdowns, they get on the perimeter, they run. I think that's what we're going to see from Ezekiel Elliott and Dontre Wilson this year. I don't think we're going to see them as much as Carlos Hyde or Jordan Hall. They are freshmen and they are, slashbacks. So, they're not the kind of guy who's going to put their head down and give you 5 yards just yet. But I do think this year, we'll see definitely some mighty plays from those guys because they're fast, they're fun to watch.
Now, can you see Dontre Wilson playing, what you just talked about, that hybrid back? I know we all like to call it the Percy Harvin position,
right.
But, do you, personally, I think they might be using him a lot in that. Do you see that as well?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I don't see him setting up at H-back for more than 3 or 4 snaps a game. Either you're going to have him out in the perimeter, they're going to run him in a lot of motion, a lot of tosses, a lot of reverses or inside pitches like we saw at Florida with Jeff Demps. So I think that's something to look out for.
Okay, now let's take a look at the offense before we go with the defense from here. And They returned all but one starter from 2012. And outside of Braxton Miller, because we're going to get to him later, who's poised to really have a breakout year in this loaded offense in 2013?
Well, I think Braxton, like you said, is a guy you have to watch out for. But the guy who's going to be throwing it to, I think, Devin Smith. He had a big year, when Braxton was a freshman, and then a sophomore last year had a big receiving year. So, that chemistry only gets stronger in the offseason. So I think he's definitely going to be the number one target for Braxton this season.
Let's go ahead and talk about what we've been expecting this whole segment. Braxton Miller, obviously the undisputed leader in this offense in 2012, and he led the team both in rushing and passing and broke the single-season record in total offense at Ohio State. What's different about Braxton in 2013? I've heard a lot about maturity, fundamentals. What's going to make him better this season than he was in 2012, considering he had, one of the best years in Ohio State history as quarterback?
I think his leadership. I think his leadership is one of the things that's going to be different from Braxton. Last year his offensive line kind of carried him some games. They gave him a lot of time, and they're going to do that again. But this year, nobody's going to look to the offensive line to be the man on the offense. They're going to look to, excuse Braxton. Braxton's got a load on his shoulders this year, and I think he's going to carry it. And I think that he understands that this is his offense, and he needs to work it the way that everybody wants to. And he is the guy who is responsible for everything this year.
What we've talked about Braxton Miller just now, are the stars aligned to have that Heisman-type season?
I think so. I think they are aligned. And going into the season, I think I would give him the favorite to win it. I don't think that Johnny Manziel is going to have quite the year he did last year. Those SEC defenses, once they get film and they understand how Johnny Manziel plays, it's going to be a whole different beast for him. Jadeveon Clowney, you look at him, he probably won't take 100% of the snaps this year. He's got to watch out for his NFL career. So that kind of limits those two. And then it almost becomes an open race, and you really have to figure, Braxton's going to be the guy to go to. And I do see him holding it up at the end of the year. He can run, he can pass, and a lot of people think that he is only a scrambling quarterback.
Yeah.
You watch him sit back in the pocket, he can pick defenses apart. So I really do think it's the year for Braxton to win the Heisman.
All right, now we almost forgot to talk about the other side of the ball, but just quickly here. One starter returns out of this front seven, and luckily they arguably have the best linebacker, and all of the Big Ten in Ryan Shazier, but you're losing guys like John Simon, and they're gone too. Yeah. So is this the ultimate weakness of this team as a whole? Is this the front seven, particularly the linebacking corps?
Yeah, I think if you were to pick out one weakness, I don't think anything on the offense can really be picked out as a weakness, but I do think the linebackers are weak. Granted, you have Ryan Shazier, who is, if not the best linebacker in the Big Ten, the best linebacker in the country.
Yeah.
So he is going to be phenomenal. But Curtis Grant has yet to really prove himself. And there's only, I think, one or two guys on the defensive line who have played big-time minutes last year. But I think that the defensive line is going to be good. You hear what Noah Spence and Adolphus Washington are doing in practice, those young guys. And then you have Joel Hale and Mike Bennett, who are doing good things. And up the middle, granted, you do have to replace John Simon and Jonathan Hankins, which are two huge shoes to fill in. But I do think it's the linebackers that are a weak spot. But as the front seven as a whole, I do, if you have to pick out one weak spot, it's just because they're unproven.
Kind of wrap this up here. Last question. What is your prediction when Ohio State begins what they've been calling the chase this Saturday against Buffalo? What is your prediction in that game, and what is your prediction for Ohio State at the end of the season? Where are they going to finish?
I think this week they get it done. I don't think there's anything that Buffalo can really do about it. And at the end of the year, it's tough. I think they work their way through the schedule. They're a much better team than last year. They bought into Urban Meyer's program. I see them going 12-0. That Big Ten championship game, possible rematch with Michigan. A lot of people like them this year. So 13-0, it's hard to see them winning.
This schedule's made for it.
The schedule
is absolutely made for it.
Absolutely
an
made.
Undefeated year again.
Yeah, absolutely made for 12-0. So I don't see that there's any reason why they can't be hoisting the national championship game, or hoisting the trophy
Yeah.
at the end of, in the beginning of January. I think an ultimate disappointment for Ohio State, if they don't wind up in one of those games in Pasadena, I think it's a spoiled season.
Yeah,
for
and
Ohio
I'll agree.
State.
I'm at least thinking, a Rose Bowl berth.
Right,
And I will go on the record and say that Michigan and Ohio State will be playing back-to-back this year.
Yeah.
That is just my opinion. Brandon, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure to have you on. Well, that's going to be it for this edition of the Sports Perspective. If you are going to the game this Saturday, make sure to dress appropriately and drink plenty of water throughout the game. It's supposed to be a hot one. Also, make sure to follow us on Twitter and visit our webpage at thelantern.com/Buckeye TV for all your up-to-date news and sports. For all of us here at the Buckeye TV studios, I'm Brad Comer, and have a wonderful evening.